Welcome to the Football Retro Podcast.
The word welcome, I guess, is stretching it a little when you're an Australian in a place like this today.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of the Football Retro Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny. Today I've got Fatty, Adasi, and a special guest, Anthony. How you doing, guys? How you doing, Fatty?
Doing well, Johnny. Nice little topic today, actually. We touched on this a few times over the last few episodes, but we'll have to finally get into one properly.
Adasi, how you doing, man?
Good. Looking forward to tonight's episode. Brings back a lot of great memories.
And welcome to the shit-talking show of the Football Retro Podcast. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
So would it be fair for me to call you a bit of a Socceroos expert?
Well, I think if you've been to enough games, as many games as I've been to, yeah, probably that'd probably be a good name.
So, can you give us about 30 to 45 seconds, a bit of a background of who you are, and introduce yourself to I guess
specific. Very, very specific. 30 to 45 seconds. Tell us about
if it's 46 seconds, I'm cutting you off.
Well, I've been going to see the Socceroos since probably late 80s. 87 was my first Socceroos match. So I've been to quite a few games, and over the years, just as a fan of it's evolved into, a passion, like I guess many people, but first and foremost, I'm a fan. And, through that, I've been able to, build my own sort of profile. And I studied sports coaching and sport administration, got a degree in that. And from there, I just sort of met people and started networking and, know quite a few people in Australian football. And over the years, built up a new brand called Football Cult, where I sell T-shirts where we look at the stories and the history of Australian football. And then we basically use those designs and, all the passionate stories that we have of Australian football, cover it through Football Cult.
Perfect. Thanks, man. And today...
How long was that, Johnny?
Sorry?
How long was that?
It was 49 seconds, but I forgave him. Today, tomorrow the 16th of November is a very special date in Australian football, and that's why we're recording this episode and talking about this. So obviously, it takes us back to the Aloisi penalty, the Australia versus Uruguay match at ANZ Stadium. It was a big event for the sport in this country, so we'll get into that later on. But I want to start off with, it brings a lot of different memories for everyone. Obviously, happy ones for the Australian fans, not so happy for the Uruguayans. Where were we that night? Fatty, where were you that night that Australia qualified for the Germany World Cup?
I remember that night very vividly, actually. I was supposed to be going to the game and was trying to get tickets. A mate was supposed to organise them, fell through, couldn't come through with it. We ended up at Penrith Panthers to watch the game on the big screen. And it was funny because we had to argue with the management there to put the game on. I don't know what it was on at the time, something else.
It was November, so there would have been any rugby league or rugby union or anything. AFL or nothing.
I don't know what it was. There was something else. We had to convince them to put it on the big screen, and they said, okay, no worries. No one was even there to watch a game. It was only us. And we finally ended up putting it on the big screen, and then slowly but surely more people started to come around, and it ended up being a massive spectacle as the game went on, and people realised that the game was being played. I don't know if they didn't realise, but yeah, and it was hundreds of people gathered around the big screen at Penrith Panthers there, watching the Socceroos qualify for the 2006 World Cup.
Darcy, you were there.
Yes, I was very fortunate to be there. And I remember the day vividly. I actually had an exam for uni that day. It was at 2 p.m. or 2:30 and finished at 5:30. So I had to kind of time it to finish the exam, get the train out to Homebush Stadium, and then, got the exam out of the way, did that, and then got my yellow shirt on because they encouraged people, I remember, to wear yellow, whatever it was. I went to Kmart, got myself a yellow T-shirt, put that on. Got on the train. You can feel the build-up. The trains were filled with fans heading to the stadium, and then got off at Lidcombe and got the train to Olympic Park. And just the atmosphere was really building. You could feel the tension, feel the nerves. And as you get in, got inside the stadium pretty early, and just was very nerve wracking. Just as the stadium got filled up, and just couldn't wait for the game to kick off. And we were down 1-0 from the first leg, and just all the scenarios. What if? What's going to happen here? Who's Gus Hiddink going to play? And it was just an amazing night. And with what happened for the rest of the evening, and the result was absolutely euphoric. And I was almost in tears by the end of the night. Strangers hugging each other, embracing each other. The wait was over. So it was the best football experience I've ever been to in my life.
Ian, what about you?
Wow. Well, it started for me very early that day. My dad and I had taken the day off. We decided we were going to go to the hotel before the match. So we got there at about 11 o'clock, and you wouldn't have even known there was a World Cup qualifier on. It was just business as usual at the Parramatta Park Hyatt. There was an accountant's conference on upstairs, and there was no one around. Then all of a sudden you see one after the other, each of the players come out of the lunchroom downstairs. And as they're walking past, I'm shaking hands with them, wishing them good luck for tonight. So when Kuehl came past, I shook his hand and I saw his tattoo. You got to remember, I was in my 20s then too, and I was just like, oh, this is Harry Kuehl, unbelievable. I've shaken his hand before the match. And the players are coming through. Cahill's coming through. Schwarzer, they're all coming through. I'm shaking their hands. I'm saying, come on, boys. Good luck, boys. Trying to pump them up. And then my dad was over there talking to Gus Hiddink, and he wasn't too impressed that he'd interrupted him. He was like just focusing on what he had to do with the boys, And but that's okay. We forgive him for that. But they were very focused guys. I just remember there was also this room off their lunchroom where they had all of these Socceroos jerseys lined up that were ready to be signed by the whole team. So I don't know who'd organised that beforehand, but there were literally hundreds of Socceroos jerseys across these tables that the hotel had organised that the players were going to sign. From that moment on, you could start to see things building in the streets. You could see some of the cars were green and gold, and people were starting to make their way in. I remember when we got to Homebush, you go down Australia Avenue and you get to the pubs, and it was just packed full of people in green and gold, and you start to get those butterflies in your stomach, and you get to the stadium way too early. You get inside the stadium and there's no one in there, and time just seems like it's going so slow. But by the time you got in there and things kicked off, it was pretty good. It was, pretty spectacular.
Is that one of the best nights you've experienced inside a stadium in Australia?
I think so. From my own perspective, I don't know, I was caught up in the moment, but I actually thought that the actual stadium moved at the end. There was that much happiness and movement and euphoria in the stadium. You'll probably like this though, Johnny. The best football match I've ever been to in my life was Australia versus Argentina in 1993. I remember looking across to the western side, and the whole side was full of white and sky blue confetti, and I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And watching Maradona play, it just had a massive impression on me. So from a spectacle point of view, I guess as an Australian, you can't ever forget 2005. But as a football fan, watching Maradona in 93 was probably just tops it.
On a personal experience, that game was a bit of a weird one for me. So I was overseas going through football trials, and I was trialing at a couple of different clubs over there, and it was morning over there, obviously, in South America. And I remember watching the game and trying to hard now to leave, and the game kept on going and going. Fuck, extra time, and so I had to leave. I left and had my mate over there messaging me the updates, but it was the worst messages because they were so far apart. It's like, oh, penalties now. There was no back then. There was no smartphones where you can go and watch it as you're walking. Right. So it's all text messages. Oh, penalties now. Like, fuck. I'm like, Uruguay scored. Viduka missed. I'm like, fucking Australia going through. So I was like, I was by myself, and I just got off the bus in the middle of a park. I'm like, yes. But it was a bit of a weird and different experience for me. Funnily enough, and I know Fatty's going to give me shit for this, the series before that against Uruguay, I didn't mind Uruguay going through because living in Australia for the years that I was back then, 01, it would have been 4 years, maybe 5 years since I was in Australia. I felt like over here, I didn't care as much for the football side of things. And I was thrown into this Aussie culture where I didn't see the same passion or the same care factor as where I came from in South America. So I thought, you know what, it means more for the Uruguayan people than it does for Australian people. So in that case, I hope the Uruguayans get it. The second time around, I feel like, I want Australian football to grow. I want the sport to grow in this country. And that's the reason why I want Socceroos to go through. So very happy they did, and it did mean a lot.
Or maybe that's just a little bit of your Uruguayan blood there shining through. Trying to suppress now.
Oh, bloody South Africans always talking crap. Let's jump into the match, because obviously we know when you think Uruguay and Australia, you think Uruguay obviously a stronger football history, culture, but looking on paper, and we spoke last week to Ante Kovic a little bit about the golden generation, the players that were coming through. I don't know if I'm being biased here, but the Australian team on paper easily matched, in my opinion, the Uruguayan one. What do you think, Anth?
Well, at the time, I think it definitely did. All of the players were playing in Europe. Even guys like Chilena and Archie Thompson and guys like that, they were playing in Holland. So not everyone was in the Premier League, but they were still playing in Europe. So I think on paper, it was, for me, it was definitely the golden generation of Socceroos and the best squad that we'd ever been able to put together. But to be fair to Uruguay, they still had outstanding players. They had, Recoba. They had star players. I'm an Inter fan, so I had a soft spot for Recoba. But the Socceroos, I think, definitely matched them. But I think the hitting influence was particularly an important point for that particular match, and then going forward into the World Cup.
I totally agree. I think one of the biggest names that's not omitted, I think he does. I think as we go on, it becomes more and more obvious the effect that hitting had on the Socceroos in a short amount of time. He come in a very, very short amount of time and got the team playing with a belief and a desire, even against much more technically superior opposition. You always felt that you could do something, or you could nick a result, or you had a chance. Purely because of the belief and the desire. Yes, we had outstanding players on paper, and as Anthony mentioned, all the players were playing in Europe at the time and at the top of their careers. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that. The generation after that, yes, some were, some weren't, but I think it's tailed off now. But yeah, a major factor, and people don't really say like, okay, the players are great, and you had the Puels, the Cahills, the Vidukas, everyone at the top, the peak of their powers. Hitting was enormous for the Socceroos. It was massive, and not just for that game, but for the whole World Cup campaign as well. The games we played, the way we played those games, the never say die attitude. That game against Japan, it just proved that the hitting effect and what a good manager can actually do.
Let me read the lineup for you. So, Mark Schwarzer in goals. 3 defenders, Lucas Neal, Tony Popovic and Tony Vidmar. 5 in the middle, you got Bresciano, Cahill, Chipperfield, Colina, Edmonton and Grella, and then Viduka up front. So,
good team.
Like I said, like you said, Anth, as well, every player playing in Europe, Serie A, not just Europe, because not Denmark and the Bulgarian second division. They're playing in the Serie A, in La Liga, and the Premier League. You knew who everyone was playing. And what I keep going back to is not only that, when the subs came on, you know where they were playing as well. Because Aloisi came off the bench. He was at Osasuna. He wasn't at a small club. With all respect to the current players now in the Socceroos the last few years, every time a new player comes off the bench, I have to Google to see where they are. You had Harry Kewell, Skoko, and Aloisi come on that game.
Yeah.
Good experience in there. Wow.
Stan Lazaridis was on the bench. He was a Premier League player. Yeah. So For to have Harry Kewell on the
Very
bench.
unfortunate. Very unfortunate for Stan to miss out. In playing, particularly being such a good left-footed player. But we had the talent. We had Chipperfield and we had Kewell on the left. And you're right, Johnny. The bench was good too. So moving forward, we had a good, I think, a really good World Cup campaign.
Darcy, 05, Harry Kewell. He was at Liverpool, right?
Yeah, he was. Yes. He won the Champions League that year, and I think it was his second year, going into his third year season at Liverpool. And I remember that about the Gus hitting factor. He was doing the Socceroos job part time as well, because I think he was coaching PSV at the same time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah. So people thinking, how's he going to do two jobs at once? On one other side of the world, but he made it work. And one of the probably the most important decisions made by Football Australia, I think, in terms of what happened to Australian football afterwards.
It's also in the first leg in Uruguay, Harry Kewell and Archie Thompson started. So there's a bit of a shift in the lineup, in positions, in the structure of the team. And you had Mark Bresciano on the bench for that game. It's obviously a big change, Bresciano coming on and scoring the goal.
That's the beauty, I think, of hitting. He wasn't afraid to realize if something didn't work and change it. He was very proactive in making those changes. He wasn't one to sort of sit back and rest on his laurels, or to be one of those managers that went into his shell or get very defensive. He knew he needed to get a result, and he did. And just on a side note, for me, not saying the greatest Socceroo, but my personal favourite, Mark Bresciano. Loved him in the Serie A. Loved him for the Socceroos. He just had a swagger about him.
Was it the haircut?
He can relate.
Or the celebration.
His distribution, because I like to play that position. When I was younger, I did.
Yeah.
So I really value that position, and I loved the way he played it. And he just had a way about him.
His gladiatorial celebration was perfect.
That goal and that celebration is iconic.
Very Cantona-like.
Very, very iconic.
You mentioned about Gus Hiddink making the tough calls. Kovic mentioned last episode about the goalkeeper spot. And the reason why Kalic played against Croatia was just because Gus didn't have full confidence in Schwarzer.
Yeah, that's right. That was a very interesting point as well, and very candid, insight into how Gus operated. As we mentioned, he wasn't afraid to make that call. He lost confidence in Schwarzer after that game, according to Ante, and replaced him with Kalic, and then obviously Kalic's blunder against Croatia, and then straight back. But apparently they were saying that Ante said that Schwarzer may not have been 100% fit, and he might have gotten a call up, and he was very nervous about that. But as we know, that didn't occur, obviously. But yeah, it was very interesting to see that as well. But it shows you, and that's a position that generally managers wouldn't chop and change. You wouldn't chop and change goalkeepers. Definitely not during a World Cup campaign. Not because you think your keeper made a mistake, because taking your goalkeeper off and saying, "No, I'm replacing you," when he's not injured, clearly is a vote of no confidence, which can damage a goalkeeper's confidence very, very quickly, more than any other position, I believe. Because other positions, you have 2-3 players fighting for that same position. Goalkeeper is different. When you're the number one, it's very, very hard to be replaced. Goalkeepers have a long career, and they'll stay in that position for a long time. But it's also a testament to Schwarzer's mental strength. The fact that he gets dropped and comes back and still is enormous, plays an enormous role for the Socceroos, even after not getting to play that Croatia game. I think is a testament to his mindset.
In regards to Uruguay, so Forlan came off in the 19th minute in the first leg. Obviously didn't play the second leg. So that was a massive blow for them. And it was a massive transition for the Uruguayan team, because after this playoffs, the coach got sacked, Fossati got sacked, and Tabares came on. And since then, he's transitioned the whole Uruguayan squad to the point where the next World Cup, there were semi-finalists, and he's still in the role right now. So as bad as he was for the South American team, it was probably a good thing for them to happen, because it was a smack they needed to do massive changes for the better. Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you look at Fossati, he was incredibly emotional, probably overly emotional, and that got to him. And he knew that there was a pressure situation. Uruguay didn't help themselves by saying they had a divine right to qualify for the World Cup. By the time they got to Sydney, the media had made sure that all of Australia knew what was going on. And it's probably the first time I've ever heard Australians boo a national anthem. So we were ready for it.
So was that a Dusty? Was that
I was one of them.
Yeah,
confession time, Dusty?
a confession.
Anthony, did you do the same?
I did, mate. And I tell you what, it's the first and only time I've done it. And I did
Same.
I did it because I was compelled to, based on the way they treated us over there. But as you get older, you learn probably not to do that.
I think you mentioned how they treated us there, and one of the things that you think about was like how we got there and how they treated us, and also they kept changing the kickoff time, so then the Socceroo team couldn't get back to Australia at a good time, and that was when I think they organised a chartered flight.
That's right. Frank Lowy was very quick to take action, and the administration, as much as the administration gets a lot of criticism, at that particular time, that administration did the right thing by the players and absolutely threw everything they could behind the team in order to qualify.
That was a big talking point for Uruguayans as well, saying that there's obviously the Socceroos flew back comfortable, getting massages on the plane on the way in, and they had to fly obviously in very different conditions to Australia.
But who forced them to? Were they forced to? Was it some mandated thing?
I guess financial situations are very different between the Socceroos and the Uruguay.
Whose fault is that they don't have enough pesos? It's not our problem.
Look, obviously I did since I've been in Australia, I've spoken to a lot of Uruguayans, and this game gets brought up all the time. The one constant thing that comes up from different groups of Uruguayans that I speak to that don't even know each other is how badly they were treated at the stadium, like children and kids getting yelled at and spat on, and something that we're not used to here with Australians going to a game. As much as I love the rivalry and as much as I love that hostile environment for the away team, did you guys see any of that? Can you guys? I know the media. You mentioned the media, Anthony. I know that they played a big part in this happening. Did you guys witness any of that, or what did you guys think?
I didn't. I didn't see anything in that regard. I saw some, friendly banter outside the stadium. But I think had you arrived later or closer to the kickoff time, outside would have been pretty hostile.
I personally didn't see anything of that, but look, it wouldn't surprise if you're going to have that silly behaviour going on. I guess so much riding on the game, but you're going to have a bunch of people doing that.
Especially with the media and the way they covered Australia's entry into Uruguay. That was a big point as well. The pictures. I mean, the pictures didn't tell any lies, and it wasn't the first time that we'd not been treated well. And particularly for Australians, the broader population who aren't used to that sort of thing. For football people, you're not really fussed about those sorts of things, the rivalries, and you look at what happens in Argentina with the River Boca game, or you look at the La Liga Clasico, you look at all the fantastic club matches, and you look at the stadiums and the passion that's involved in football, and it's not unfamiliar to us. But for the broader population in Australia, I think a lot of people saw that as being unsavoury, and they wanted to, get their revenge, I suppose.
I'm on the other side here. I like that. I like that fact that you're the away team. You should feel unwelcome. You shouldn't feel like, oh, this is a nice, we're coming here and it's all football and let's all be happy and whatnot. So I don't have an issue with it. Yes, within reason. Obviously, there are certain things that you wouldn't advocate, spitting and all that sort of stuff. But the hostility, absolutely, 100%, I think, definitely belongs in football. And it's part of why we have home and away games. That's part of the advantage of having, the crowd behind you or against you. It makes a difference. But funny you all mentioned media, because I feel like since then, or since really the Asian Cup win, I feel like the media sort of very, very backed off the Socceroos. I remember that 2006 World Cup, the advertising was non-stop. It was incessant. It was always around, and it constantly gave you goosebumps. And you were like, yes, I can't wait for the next game. And we'd go out in the middle of the night, now it's Crown Bar in Parramatta. It used to be One World Sport at the time. Went and watched the Croatia game, all hours of the morning. Packed, absolutely packed. The streets were buzzing. Everyone was buzzing about football. And it was because there was so much coverage. It's sad now because I don't see the same sort of coverage for Australian football as a whole, whether it be the Socceroos, the A-League or whatnot. I feel like we're really missing out on that. Media was so behind it back at that time. It's chalk and cheese. There's an absolute difference to how they portray football now or cover football as opposed to when they did during that campaign and, the World Cup itself.
What do you think that is, Fatty?
I really don't know. I think SBS have a lot of influence behind it, being, very football centric and focus a lot on football. So that was obviously a part. But I think Australians have a lot of connection with the English Premier League based on the the football that we watch here, as opposed to other European leagues. And a lot of our players playing in the Premier League or playing in other teams within Europe that were known to us, they could sort of relate. Now, as you mentioned, it's a bit harder to relate to players that you're not really sure of where they're at or how they're performing. So it was a bit harder. And they were superstars. They were superstars compared to today's players. As again, no offense or anything like that, but those players were superstars in their own right. You put that team now compared to any Australian team afterwards, and it's a big difference. It doesn't compare. It doesn't compare.
I want to take you back to the actual game. I'm not sure how much you guys remember from the events of the game and the incidents of the game. Popovic got a yellow card in the 27th minute, and he was subbed off not long after that. Here's another decision by Gus Hiddink, Fatty, that you were talking about, to save him from a red card, because I think it was close to a second yellow straight away after that. So 31st minute took Popper off and put Harry Kewell on, changing the shape once again. What are your highlights from the match? Do you remember much of the actual events of the night?
Are you asking me or
anyone?
I remember I remember that Popovic yellow card. He was very fortunate actually to get a yellow card only. It was an elbow, I think, to Recoba, just near the sideline. And this, got to watch out here. And then took him off. And I remember Recoba also had a chance 1-on-1 with Schwarzer, got through on goal through the defense, and he missed it. Surprisingly, you'd bet on Recoba to put that away, and you'd think, well, he missed this. This could be Australia's night. This could actually happen. And this could things go our way. And then Kewell comes on as well, and then that miss kick, the best miss kick that ever happened in Australian football history. And as soon as Bresciano hit that in the top corner into the roof of the net, the stadium just erupted. I remember the relief leading on the night 1-0 and also leveling on aggregate. It could go in either way. And just a lot of moments. I think it was a very tight game, tense. Uruguay had their chances. I remember their striker Richard Morales missing a header from close range. It was just so much tension, so much nerves, and I think it could have gone. It was a very 50-50 battle. I remember it as.
Wow, Darcy, that's a lot of detail, man, for something that was fucking 16 years ago now.
Can't forget something like that, man.
Anth, what do you remember?
I remember that I remember sitting there thinking to myself that Hiddink's got them working how he wants to, but there's still some way to go. I remember when he took over his first game, we were playing in the white kits, and he was ropeable, really, really ropeable with the way that we were playing. That we were playing against Asian teams or in warm-up matches. and we hadn't quite got it together yet. But by the time we got to that match, you could see that he was working his philosophy into the team, that the team was able to adopt to what he wanted, and the work rate in midfield was great. But it really was the longest game on earth. I honestly felt it went for 10 hours. It was just, by the time we got to penalties, I was like, here we go again, here we go again. It's going to be another, disappointment, or it could be a disappointment. I can't bear to watch this. And then, we had a fantastic situation with Schwarzer, and we made it.
You both mentioned Recoba in the last couple of minutes. Was it surprising that he came off in the 72nd minute? I mean, it's a big talking point for Uruguay, for your biggest star and your most dangerous man. When the draw was coming closer and closer towards penalties, to take your best penalty taker and your most dangerous player off the pitch.
I was surprised. I was surprised that he did that. He was, like I said before, he was incredibly emotional. If I think of a team that was incredibly emotional and absolutely lost the plot, you think about the Brazil team in Brazil when they played Germany, when they were, lined up singing the national anthem. I remember thinking to myself, this team's going to get smashed.
What was the score? Just to remind everyone.
7-1.
Thank you.
So when you have that height of arousal or that overstimulation, it can be really negative. And I just remember seeing Fossati thinking he's not calm. And you look at Gus Hiddink, and the absolute most movement you would get from him is him putting his finger underneath his chin while he was thinking. He was absolutely composed. He had the players playing how he wanted them to play, and he had a plan. And you could see that the guy knew what he wanted from us, and also if anything went wrong, the example you used with Tony Popovic, that our players were adaptable enough and he had enough options. I remember he wanted them to really, really be fit because of the type of intensity that he played. And all credit to him. I think he had a massive influence on that particular match.
I think that has a lot to do with the different pressures the coaches were under. With Australia not qualifying 20 World Cups in 74 before that, like you said, Uruguay came thinking, okay, we're Uruguay, versing a non-football country, we have to qualify. So the coach felt that pressure in a way where, if I don't qualify here, I'm done. It's embarrassing. Whereas Gus Hiddink was like, I've got nothing to lose. If I make it, I'm a hero. If I don't make it, but I'm close, I've done my job. So I think that pressure played different to both coaches, and this was a result of it.
I think it's we're taking a little bit away from Hiddink here and how he could sort of think on his feet and make changes, as Anthony said, when they needed to be. I remember a story. I'm not too sure what the truth. I don't know if there's much truth behind it, but something that the plan was to put Kalac in if it went to penalties, because Kalac being a bit more imposing.
That's true. That is true.
That Kalac was supposed to go in goals, though he was going to sub Schwarzer just for the penalties, but then Emerton came off with cramps, and then they scrapped the idea. So I don't know how true that is. I read a lot of things previously about it.
I'm pretty sure Graham Arnold said that was true.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't listen to Graham Arnold much, so I can't say.
He was very green back then as a coach, but he's come a long way. He has
come a long way, actually. Someone spoke about him. I read an article about him, I think, recently, or there was an interview about him. They were talking about how, and it was Ante as well. Ante also mentioned how he was very, he wasn't very professional. He was one of the boys and blah, 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 and he didn't really take it to that level. But after that experience, and he sort of pulled himself together, and now, I mean, look at him. He's a consummate professional, as much as we may not like him based on other reasons. But he, you can't deny his pedigree, or you can't deny his meticulous and approach when it comes to games now.
So I know it's only opinion, and there's no right answer. But with a Frank Farina as a coach or someone else as a coach, do you think Australia would have made it to the World Cup?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't have been as confident.
I don't think we would have made it. Nothing against Frank. Had it been an Australian coach, I don't think we would have made it. We needed that European, or it could have been any of any stature in Europe, even South America. It didn't matter. A football country where the coach had the experience like Gus Hiddink had. He'd had wonderful club experience. He was a coach of the Netherlands. He had incredibly good success with South Korea. And I think he was the right person for the right moment. And those big moments he lived for, he thrived off them. And I think it was really his coaching expertise that got us through. And you know what? At the end of the day, it was penalties. So, it could have gone the other way. But what we saw in the World Cup from Hiddink was, for me, the greatest story. I remember when we played against Brazil, thinking to myself, I'd never seen an Australian team play so well and lose. That the way in which we kept the ball, the way in which we passed the ball, the short passing, the pressing, it was something that I'd never seen before, because I was so used to seeing Australian teams play long balls and graft it out. And it was such a good change. And I think that saw us move into a more continental or European style of play, which I enjoy.
I only mentioned Frank as well because of the previous qualifiers. As
That's fine. Yeah. I've met him quite a few times, and he's a nice guy, so I don't want to slag him off.
That's fine. Look, Fadi, you mentioned before we started recording about Uruguay and France and saying they keep bringing this up. Well, that's what the Aussies have, this game, and so important to them. So I want to take a few moments and have a look as to why it's so important in Australian football history, why it was built up the way it was, why we look back at this match as a historic piece of, obviously, pivotal point in Australian football. There was a lot of factors that came into play. It wasn't just qualifying for the World Cup, in my opinion, but you had the birth of the A-League happening at the same time. You had the Frank Lowy influence. You had the end of the NSL. You had the golden generation coming together that we just spoke about. You had the failed previous attempts into the World Cup being so close. The fact that Uruguay was the previous attempt for the 2002 World Cup as well. The media build-up, the sort of the mini rivalry that happened. All these things turned into this massive event that was for the Socceroos qualifying for the 2006 World Cup. And it was a long time between qualifiers.
It was, and it meant a lot to a lot of people, but none more so than the people that had been there before and failed. When you look at the fans in the stadium in 2005, there were fans there that had been to so many campaigns and seen Australia lose, whether it be by one goal or on aggregate. It was just one of those things. And we also had the curse of the witch doctor, which you probably have heard about before, that sort of circled around from, the late, great Johnny Warren. And you started to believe things like that. The 74 team were unique in their own way. I can see you've got your 74 shirt on, which is great. They're all of the pioneers. The 74 team were quite unique. They had to play a playoff. Jimmy Mackay scored the goal to put us into the 74 World Cup. You've got to keep in mind there were 16 teams, not 32 teams back then. A lot of the players that had played in that tournament, were in and around the game, whether they were in media or coaching. And the fans that had been watching failed campaign after failed campaign, really, really, everything came out. All of the emotions came out when we qualified for the first time in 32 years. So I think it meant a lot to a lot of people, but none more so than the people that had been around and had been supporting the Socceroos, for 20, 30, 40 years, for decades.
So for those people watching it that aren't sure about this curse that you're talking about, tell us a bit about this curse of the witch doctor and what it's about.
I like
Well,
this.
Yeah. Well, the Socceroos had to play a World Cup qualifier in Rhodesia, in Mozambique, which is modern day Zimbabwe. And
What year was this, sorry?
The 1960, this is for the 1970 World Cup, right? So 1969. And the players, basically, some of the players had heard that there was a witch doctor, and they wanted to. And keeping in mind, when we think about witch doctors, we're thinking about bones through your nose and all this crazy. It wasn't like that at all. The guy was wearing a suit, from what I understand. But basically, cutting up, chickens and so forth, and basically putting a curse on the Rhodesian team in order to for Australia to win the match. And the story is that they didn't pay him, so he put a curse on the Socceroos, and ever since then, the Socceroos never qualified for a World Cup. And Johnny Warren would always say, "That's the witch doctor."
That's crazy.
But thankfully,
They
we had John Safran who undid that curse for us. Went back to Mozambique with Johnny Warren in the stadium when he came back. Brought some of the chicken blood, reversed the curse, and we qualified. So there must be something in it. I don't know.
What a crazy story.
So let's
go forward. Actually, let's go from 74. Obviously, we qualified. 78. What happened in the 78 World Cup?
In the 78 World Cup, well, a lot of the players that had come through, there was coaching changes. There were players that had retired. Having to go through and play Iran was not easy. You got to remember, these were part-time players. The administration was always up and down. We didn't qualify. It's just one of those things. Rally Rasic, who was such a well-known and celebrated coach at the time for getting us into the 74 World Cup, he had to reapply for his job, afterwards. And you hear stories like that, and you think, Johnny Warren applied for it too, and he didn't get it either. So, it was very unprofessional, the way in which the administration ran the game, and timing was everything. And they had all of the right things happen at the right time in 74 and in 78. And, moving forward, it wasn't like that at all.
82.
I watched that interview with Rally Rasic about not being being sacked, if you want to call it that, for the following campaign, which is crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy to fans who had supported the 74 Socceroos, and to see. And if you watch those games, so I've got those games if you want to watch them, particularly the first one against East Germany in the 74 World Cup. Rally wasn't going to be an adventurous coach there. He didn't want to get embarrassed, but we put on a good show for a team that was supposed to be the worst team at the tournament, or the second worst team at the tournament. So, we played defensively. We played basically a 4-5-1, if you want to look at it that way, and hit them on the counter-attack. We had a few chances. That Chile game, the last game in the 74 World Cup, is quite an interesting game to watch, because we could have scored in that match. It was 0-0 in torrential rain. But that team and what he put together from 70 to 74 was credit to him for doing that. And he had the discipline, and he had the structure, and as he was also a very young coach at 34 years of age. That's not something we see. You might see more recently, but back then most coaches were older. So in 82, New Zealand went instead of us. Can you believe that? Nothing against the Kiwis, but you think about the teams that we had. And we had some good Socceroos teams in the 80s, but New Zealand went instead of us. And, we had a coach called Rudy Gutendorf who resigned, basically, we were supposed to come first in the group, but we didn't, and we didn't qualify. So, New Zealand went instead of us. So you always think about what could you have done at the World Cup at that time had it been you instead of New Zealand. Would Australia have put in a better showing at the World Cup than New Zealand did? Probably. We had some good players back then.
And I think this is the frustration. It's not that we never deserved to be in the World Cup. It's not that we got smashed. It's that these kind of stories where it's self-sabotage in some ways. It's just stupid ways of not qualifying. Yeah. We're gonna get to the Iran game in a second. It was just heartbreak and just so close. And I don't know. Talk to me about the '86 World Cup.
Well, when you look at the '86 World Cup, we see a lot of these as at our age, or we see a lot of these coaches, and we think to ourselves, "Oh yeah, they're coaches," but these were ex-players. Like you think about John Cosmina. When you think of John Cosmina, you tend to think of him more as a coach these days, or somebody in the media. But he was one of the great Socceroos strikers. And you have a look at some of the players that we had in those teams in the '80s. We're coming up against a Scottish team that was pretty good, but Sir Alex Ferguson was the assistant coach. So we were playing against Graham Souness and his team. Were Scotland better? Yeah, they're probably a better team, but they didn't really impress that much. I mean, you could have thought to yourself, well, could we have qualified? Yeah, we probably could have, but things just never went our way. And that was the story of the '80s. That was the story of Frank Arrock's campaign. He tried so hard twice to get us there, and he just couldn't.
What was the score with the Scottish?
I think it was 2-0.
2-0, and then
I think it was 2. I can't remember off the top of my head, Johnny.
I'm trying to find it.
A Darcy, surely a Darcy.
Oh, that was before my time.
Come on, Darcy.
I wasn't born.
All right. After this 1991, Anth, I've got a different question for you. But talk to us about why we didn't qualify for the 1990 World Cup.
Well, I would never have thought that Israel was such a strong opponent, and that's nothing against them. It's just that you just think to yourself, what team do we have to come up against in order for us to get through? And I would have thought against Israel we had a great chance. And we played Israel in '69 for the '70 World Cup. We didn't get through then either. So there was something about Israel that we couldn't overcome, and that's how it went. Again, some great players that were playing in the NSL, and some playing overseas, like the likes of Eddie Krinčević, Frank Farina. These guys, they were really pioneers of the European club scene, because, like I said before, in '74, these guys were part-time players. But by the time we got to the '80s, some of our players were playing overseas. So our squad was getting better. We had a idiosyncratic coach in Frank Arrock, but he was very determined, and unfortunately fell at the last hurdle again.
And you were right before. It was 2-0 in Scotland and 0 here in Australia.
Right, there you go. 0, not worth remembering, but that's the way it went, unfortunately. And it almost got to a stage where in 2005, where if we didn't qualify, you were like, okay, well, that was expected. So the fact that we did, it lasted for so long. That euphoria just lasted for so long, and the excitement about what was going to happen next year.
I know it's going to be a tough challenge to do this in 2 minutes, but can you give us a quick explanation as to why Johnny Waring is such a big figure in Australian football history?
I think as a person, he was a good person. I think that's important. I think that he embodied the Australian spirit. He was a true believer in football. He wanted to call it football and pushed for it to be called football, even though largely it's called soccer here. Johnny was the poster boy. He was the perfect person in a Wogs game, particularly in the 60s, 70s, 80s. He was the Anglo-Australian face who had risen to the top from the suburbs and had made it. And he was a great talker. He had a great ability to be able to read the game, to be able to know what was going on. And you quite often agreed with what he was saying. And he just had that passion for Australia. And what he saw in football was not just that Australian football was needing to go down a certain path in order to be successful. He thought that we should bring football to Australia in order for Australia as a nation to be successful. So our prosperity benefited as Australians by having football in our lives. So I think that was an important part of who he was.
Perfectly put.
Watching Johnny on SBS and other programs where he made guest stints, where even when you didn't know him as a person, you could see the passion he had for football, and it made me love the fact that there were other people. Because growing up, being a migrant, you think no one likes football here as much as you do, coming from overseas. But when you see the likes of Johnny Warren, the likes of the Craig Fosters, when you're watching SBS and that football-focused coverage, you start to think there are people that care about the game. And Johnny Warren was one of those that, as Anthony said, was really the leading light to bring football from, that hidden away, no, we don't talk about this, we don't care about it, really brought it to the front and made it the yes, football's here and football's becomes, and he really paved the way for a lot of these other people and commentators and pundits and experts, quote unquote.
I'll just add that what made Johnny so special is that after he finished playing, he decided to go on these football journeys around the world, particularly Brazil, South America, and Europe. And also, when he was still playing I think it was 1973, he got his FIFA coaching badges and he came first in the class. So this is a person who was absolutely committed to the game.
And you mentioned about Johnny Warren's passion, none more so when after the heartache of 97, after the game in the studio, he was in tears. I remember that. You could see how much it meant for him.
Before we get to the Iran game, let's talk about the Argentina 93 game. So Argentina came from a 5-0 defeat against Colombia and had to win this game to make it to the World Cup. Once again, coming from a team like Argentina, it'll be embarrassing to lose to Australia. Maradona comes out of... Well, he didn't have a club in 93. He had just come off a drug ban for a couple of years, international ban. He didn't have a club. He trained to get fit for this playoff. And the first leg is in Sydney.
Yeah, and that match, like I said before, you could just see all the confetti all over the stadium. There was so much tension. But when those guys were in the, say, first 10, 15 minutes passing the ball around, you just knew that this was a world-class team. And we had our fans behind us. We had some momentum when we came back and scored that goal. People would say, well, what did Maradona do? Well, he crossed the ball that Balbo headed to score the goal. That was enough to beat Bosnich in order to be able to have the away goal. So, people expected more from Maradona. I remember there was a guy when after the match finished, he was screaming on the way out, Maradona prima donna. Mm-hmm. And he just wouldn't shut up, Maradona prima donna. I remember as a 12-year-old listening to this guy and thinking to myself, how can you say that about the greatest player that's ever played the game? So, I think Australia had some, again, building on players playing in Europe. We got players like Robbie Slater, who had a great relationship on the pitch with Maradona as an opponent, I guess you could say. But we had our goal, and we were playing over in Argentina and Buenos Aires, and a deflected goal off Tobin. Zabika was in goal, and that was the end of it. Again, you just think to yourself, what do we need? I mean, it would have been a massive scalp to take Argentina. And honestly, before Maradona got done for drugs in the tournament, I thought they were going to win it. So these things happen, you know.
And we'll go back to the heartache. It's a deflected cross that stopped the Socceroos from potentially going to the World Cup. It's not
exactly.
It's not a 5-0 thrashing. It's not a convincing win.
It was just another thing that happened to us, and we took it. We accepted it. We almost got to this point where we just accepted it. And the late Eddie Thompson, you know, he was in his own right a good coach. So, you know, what can you do? This is Maradona. I mean, you look at the players that Argentina had in that team: Batistuta, Redondo, Maradona, you know, Balbo, even the defenders, the goalkeeper, Goycochea. I mean, that team was just amazing.
But don't forget, they just came off the 86 World Cup win, the 1990 finalists. They won the 91 and 93 Copa America.
Yeah, but Johnny, we beat them for 4 goals, mate, in 1988. Maradona didn't come though.
Is that the Charlie Yankos goal?
Do you remember the Charlie Yankos goal? You've probably seen it 100 times on YouTube.
I've seen it, yeah.
I was at that match. That's my earliest memory.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about this one because this is the definition of a heartache. This is the definition of a heartache because with 20 minutes to go, you thought, yes, we're going to France. It's the Iran game that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The return leg, where was it played? Which city was it played in? Refresh my memory.
Melbourne.
It was played in Melbourne. Okay, Harry Kewell scored both in Iran. They finished 1-0. And here we're 2-0 up. Is that right? Yeah,
but the serial pest Peter Hoare came onto the pitch at halftime and ripped the net down.
Yeah.
So and I remember sitting there in the stadium saying to myself, I hate Melbourne. It's not the stadium to be playing football in. The MCG is as big as it was to host the number of people that were there. We just didn't feel the same to me. And I know I'm biased because I'm from Sydney, but there were people who were sitting around me who didn't know what offside was. It was very much a spectacle rather than a football match. And by the time they got onto the pitch, that momentum that they'd had from the dressing room with Terry Venables' rev up, it just took the momentum away. I really think that had a big part to play. But if you listen to the commentary, you probably have heard this. Johnny Warren says at 2-1, we've got to be very, very careful because this is the time where we can relax and we can concede. And as soon as he finished saying that word, Iran scored for 2-2.
You look upset still, Darcy.
Oh, just thinking about it, just when you flash back about it, I remember that night and it just fell apart, how it all fell apart, just so heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Yeah. I remember the game, we should have been up probably 3-0 within the first 20, 25 minutes. Really, Vidmar had a couple of chances.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We were dominating them from start to finish. And then, as you mentioned, that pest, Peter Hoare, that went on the field, took the net down, got the momentum back in Iran's favour. Just you thought that was a good team. And what's funny is that the Socceroos finished that campaign undefeated. The only team.
Yes, you're right. Yes, absolutely.
The World Cup campaign, not lose a match, still don't make the World Cup.
That's it. That's right. Terry Venables was undefeated.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's funny to think about it now or to laugh about certain points, but that was probably one of my earliest Socceroos memories. I had obviously come to the country only a couple of years before that. Had a massive interest in football. Obviously, into the World Cup. 98 was my first World Cup that I was very, very aware of what was happening and, could be attentive to football itself and the playing styles and whatnot. So naturally, I supported Australia, having moved here. And I remember that Iran game. I couldn't believe it. I was so angry. I went to school angry. I was frustrated. I was throwing things. I was annoyed. I was upset. How does that happen? How are you up 2 goals and then you stuff up, and not qualify? It was just very, very as Darcy said, when you start talking about it, you laugh because it's funny how things just didn't work out for you. But at the same time, you get this sick feeling in your stomach. You think, oh, imagine what could have happened. France 98, we've mentioned before, probably one of the greatest World Cups ever, in our lifetime anyway, that we could remember. And Australia could have been part of that. And it's a shame that we weren't part of it.
Yeah.
That's not to say that 2006 wasn't a great World Cup. It was also one of the greats. But it's a shame that we missed out on France 98. It really is.
Strong lineup. You got Bosnich, you got Craig Moore, Alex Tobin, Lazaridis, Slater, Zelic, Foster, Vidmar, Kuhl, Viduka. I mean, it's still a strong lineup.
Yeah, but who did you not mention?
Steve Horvat.
Yes. Did you do that on purpose?
I was mentioning the big names. So there's 10 players, big names.
Steve is a wonderful guy. Absolutely a wonderful guy. But he put his hand up to play the offside and that cost us. And we had a great guy in Milan Ivanovic, who was one of the best defenders we'd ever seen in the NSL, who played in the 93 game against Argentina, who really, you could have played him over Horvat, but that's history now.
So he was on the bench, he didn't come on.
Yeah, but that was the choice that he made. I remember when the match finished, we went back to the hotel, as my dad loves to always do, and the bus turned up, and I will never, ever forget the bus. I was standing out the front where the door was to get into the hotel, and I remember just clapping them, thinking to myself, come on, guys, lift your heads. You tried your hardest. It just wasn't meant to be. And the look of dejection on Ned Zelic's face, he was looking straight at me, and I was clapping, and there was absolutely no emotion. And then a few minutes later, this police car pulls up right in front of the bus. Mark Bosnich gets out. He had a police escort. He didn't want to go with the team. Went straight to the reception, got his key, and went upstairs. They were devastated.
Tough times.
Imagine.
Yeah, like every interview you see with Kuhl, Bosnich, or anyone else talking about this game, you can see and feel the heartbreak.
How good was Kuhl, though? How good was Kuhl as a youngster, 19 years of age? So exciting to watch, and you just think, oh, we're going to go to France. This is going to be great. We've got to get tickets. We're going to, And I do remember having a very, very, very strong feeling that the media and people around me and football at the time is that it was guaranteed almost. And when you think like that, these things can happen.
We'll quickly mention the 0-2 one, which is obviously Uruguay winning in Melbourne 1-0 and then going there and losing with a couple of late goals by Morales.
Yeah, they were very hostile. The same situation. Was the team as good as 05? No, but they still had a good team to compete. But in all honesty, I thought Uruguay was a better team at that time. We won in Melbourne. We scored. Muscat scored the penalty. But was it ever going to be enough? I never thought at the time it was. We had a very different team in the sense that we had, instead of having Zelic, we had Ocon. We had some more Premier League talent at the time. Lazaridis was playing. You've probably got the lineup there. So
Shortser, Muscat, Sean Murphy.
Yeah.
Craig Moore, Tony Vidmar, Emerton, Ocon as captains, Coco, Lazaridis, Viduka, and Kuhl.
Yeah. So
majority were playing in the Premier League at the time.
Yeah.
Ocon in Europe as well.
Yeah. So again, getting better. So coming to the place where we got to, I think timing was really a big part of it.
You're only 20 minutes away from a potential extra time and penalties. So if you hold on, anything can happen. So once again, a bit of a heartbreak, even though it's a 3-0 result.
Yeah.
I remember that game. Australia had a couple of chances. A goal. If they nicked a goal there, that would have changed everything. But
yeah, I think. Do you remember that one? Was it Harry Kuhl or was it Viduka that hit the post, top of the crossbar?
Yeah, I think it was Viduka right in front. I think he just didn't expect the ball to come to him and just went over the bar or something.
Yeah.
This guy remember. I don't know. I just want to know how you remember exact moments.
Yeah, that was. I remember we watched the game and straight after to go to school, and everyone was dejected.
Mhm.
How does he always have to give you an explanation of in a real life situation that reminded him of something? It wasn't relevant. I still don't get
These things feel like yesterday.
it.
It's so everything we just mentioned from 78 World Cup to these 02 World Cup failed qualifications, it's what built up the 05 game. That's why we're talking about it today. Is there's frustration after frustration, the way, not just the fact that Australia didn't make it, but the way that Australia didn't make it. They're so close, the heartbreak, and it all came together in the magical night of 16th of November 05.
And one thing about that 05 moment, for that qualifying campaign, FIFA made an announcement that we'd get direct qualification. Oceania would get direct qualification at the start. And then they changed it. They reversed the decision, I think, from, I don't know what it was, because from pressure from other federations saying it wasn't fair that they play these small nations and they get a spot like that, and they had to change it. Well, they changed it and then played South America. So it was kind of like a message to FIFA saying, hey, you want to change things around, and we still made it. So that's what made it more sweeter, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely remember that. There was a big uproar about it, and people were like, how bullshit. They just changed it. and yeah, qualifying was a bit of a revenge, I think, saying sort of fuck you. We still did it.
Any last messages, guys? Any last thoughts or comments before we head off?
We didn't really talk about the penalties, Johnny. Fuck.
What do you want to say?
It's important. It's important, I think, to discuss the penalties on that night. Obviously, a lot of people only remember, the magical moment is Aloisi and Aloisi burying it with his left foot, high corner there, in the high side netting there to beat the keeper. But I think a lot of credit doesn't go to Schwarzer in that penalty shootout. He was enormous.
That one-handed save.
He was absolutely enormous. And when you're watching your team, any team, whether it's a club team or national team, in a penalty situation, you have a vibe and whether you feel confident in your goalkeeper or not. And I got to say, I felt very confident in Schwarzer. I just felt like that he could. I knew that he could. The type of keeper that he was, there's a lot of confidence in that. Even though he missed one, I was like, I knew he was going to get one. I knew he had to get one. And he proved that. He proved that. The way he was in goal was monumental. It was enormous. Enormous. That clawing right hand save above his head, I'll never forget. And then getting up and celebrating in front of the player, and the player kicks the ball past him. You see it in the replay. He was because he was just in his face, and they couldn't believe that they lost to us. That's what made it sweeter, and that's why I love rubbing it in the Uruguayans' faces.
Viduka missed though. You never would have thought that would have happened.
No, and I love Viduka. Another one of my favorite players here in Bresciano, and someone that copped a lot of criticism. He doesn't score enough goals, doesn't do this, and I felt like it was very, very unjust.
He was inducted in the Sport Australia Hall of Fame yesterday. So.
I saw that. Yeah,
good on him.
Yeah,
day before. Yeah,
yeah, and I saw that, and I thought to myself, how ironic. So much shit about him. Hasn't scored enough goals. Doesn't this? Tim Cahill, whatever. They didn't realise the amount of stuff that how important Viduka was in holding up the ball or bringing other players into play.
Yeah.
Ante mentioned it last episode, Johnny. Same thing, but I got criticised for saying, Viduka's important. Back when we were playing 2006, it was saying, what's Viduka? You've got to put goal scorers on, and Harry Kewell. I felt like that's people that don't really understand football.
Yeah, for sure.
He must be important with people like Schwarzer, Neil, Popovic, Vidmar on the field. Viduka was captain of the team.
Yeah.
So that must say something.
I don't know if that the public's criticism had something to do with his career and the way it went. I don't know. I feel like for me personally, I would have loved to see him stay on a bit longer in the national team setup. I feel like he retired too soon.
Look, I would love to have you back on a different episode, Anthony, and talk about why we can't get back to the golden generation, player development in Australia, where have we gone wrong. But that's going to be another 6 hours of talking.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, and many different reasons for that. So, is it fixable? yeah, I think it's a long-term plan, not a short-term plan. So, yeah, I'd love to talk to you again.
I'd love to pick his brains actually on the Dutch system and how that even came. why we're so stringent on following this for some reason.
It's because Holland have so many World Cups under the belt, so we just wanted to copy them.
So close.
What do you want? The Argentinian system?
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I prefer the Sudanese one, but we'll talk about that a different day. All right. Adasi, Fadi, and thanks for the chat today. It was a good one.
Thanks for having me on.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Ciao.